Why is it important to avoid gaps in insulation layers? So Chris, as we know, whether in retrofit or in new build, continuity of insulation is absolutely critical to the efficacy of the insulation. So in general, we're very focused on how we can establish that insofar as possible and mitigate bridging where necessary. Yeah, what are you thinking of in particular?
So we get sort of into discussions with contractors a lot. They've got a 170 deep joist or stud or rafter or whatever, and they say, well, we can just put 160 mil of insulation in that, and then we'll put a board over the top and not worry about the sort of 10 mil of gap that you've got in there. That sort of thing massively reduces the effectiveness of the insulation. So whenever there's wind blowing, even tiny gaps, 2 or 3 mil, you can get air movement through those gaps. And on a really strongly windy day, which is exactly when you're trying to retain all your heat, you get air movement through that structure and you're leaking heat everywhere. So, when you're working with timbers, it's always best to slightly oversize the flexible insulation that's going between the timbers and make sure that all the insulation layers are together. In addition to that, the airtightness layer that goes on the inside also needs to be pressed up firmly against your insulation layer. Because again, if you've got your airtightness layer and then a gap and then insulation, you can still get air movement between the airtightness layer and the insulation. And again, you're losing quite a lot of heat. So it's really important to have all those layers bunched up together so that you don't get additional heat loss and so that you actually achieve the sort of U value targets that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's all about the performance gap between the as designed and as delivered, and in a calculation sense, we're assuming perfect performance of all those layers, and when you introduce gaps, you introduce the risk of some of those layers being bypassed.
Exactly.
As you say, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's critical as well with internal wall insulation, for example, when we're using sort of dense capillary active insulations like wood fibre, which offer all these really useful benefits that many people are aware of. You really need those layers to be in direct contact with the wall to utilise that capillary transfer of moisture. And if you introduce a gap between those two layers, then whilst the insulation is open to moisture vapor diffusion, it can't absorb and transfer and store moisture in a sort of capillary manner.
Exactly, and you're also creating very humid conditions which are ideal for mould growth. So again, when you're insulating internally, it's absolutely vital that you press your insulation firmly up against the surface to avoid mould growth. And again, we get lots of people trying to line existing buildings with a timber stud, for example, and just assume that they keep a 50 mil gap and everything will be fine. But you can do that, but that gap has to be externally ventilated, because again, you just build up warm, moist air slowly in that cavity and make it a perfect sort of growth medium for mould.
Yeah, although that method, as we've just been alluding to, creates issues with if you are ventilating that gap, then you're inviting this kind of cold airflow on the backside of the insulation, which introduce risks of wind washing and air leakage into the inside. So
Absolutely.
It's tricky to do it that way.
Don't do gaps.
Don't do gaps.
Excellent.